11 cities, hundreds of millions of people, and every single one of them is measurably sinking right now, tonight, while you watch this video. Not in a century, not in some climate projection. The satellites are recording the descent as it happens, and in this countdown, we are ranking them by speed. From the city losing a few millimeters a year, all the way up to number 1, a major world capital, home to over 20 million people, whose ground is collapsing by up to 20 inches every single year. That is not a typo. 20 inches, annually. And it is almost certainly not the city you are thinking of. 4 of the 11 are in the United States. One of them hosts the largest naval base on planet Earth. One is the city that fought its way off this list, and we will show you exactly how they did it, because it is the only genuinely hopeful story of the next 20 minutes. On this channel, we have spent this entire series documenting the war between human ambition and the ground it stands on. A $12 billion island giving way beneath billionaires, an airport 45 feet down and still descending, a government abandoning its own capital to the sea. Tonight, the full map. 11 cities ranked slowest to fastest, every number verified, counting down to the fastest sinking major city on Earth. Stay to the end, because number 1 is going to rearrange what you think you know about which cities are in trouble. Number 11, Venice, Italy, sinking rate 1 to 2 millimeters per year. The slowest city on this countdown and the one that proves slow is enough. Venice has been losing its fight with the water for 1,500 years, and the arithmetic is merciless precisely because it is small. A millimeter or two of subsidence, a couple of millimeters of rising sea every year for centuries. And the city built on wooden piles in a lagoon has descended far enough that the floods locals call aqua alta now arrive not as rare disasters but as a season. St. Mark's Square, the lowest point in the city, floods over 60 times in a bad year. Tourists wade through the world's most beautiful drawing room on raised plywood platforms while shopkeepers stack sandbags against doorways their great-grandparents kept dry. Italy's answer is one of the most expensive flood defenses ever constructed. Moe's 78 giant steel gates lying on the seafloor across the lagoon's inlets, engineered to rise on compressed air and wall the Adriatic out whenever a dangerous tide approaches. Price tag, north of 6 billion euros, decades late, wrapped in corruption scandals, and it works, for now. The gates have already turned back tides that would have drowned the city, but every engineer involved knows the clause written into the physics. Moe's was designed for the sea level of the past, and the more the Adriatic rises, the more often those gates must close. Each closure sealing off the port, the lagoon's ecosystem, and the city's breathing. Until 1 century soon, the gates would need to stay shut more than open. Venice is the gentlest entry on this list. It is also the proof that on a long enough timeline, millimeters win. Number 10, Miami, Florida. The sinking rate is a few millimeters per year in the hotspots, but Miami earns its place on this countdown through a loophole no seawall can close. Regular viewers of this series already know Miami's secret, because it decided the fate of the luxury towers of Sunny Isles in our earlier investigations. South Florida stands on porous limestone, ancient compressed reef, riddled with holes, soaked like a sponge. When the ocean rises against Miami, it does not need to come over the wall. It comes up through the ground. King tide flooding now arrives on sunny days, salt water bubbling up through storm drains and lawns miles from the beach, and no barrier on Earth can stop water that travels underneath it. And in December 2024, University of Miami researchers pointed satellite radar at the coastline and confirmed the other half of the problem. 35 coastal buildings measurably settling into that limestone, luxury towers among them, some sunk 3 inches since 2016. Add the two numbers together, with buildings pressing down and the ocean rising up through the sponge, and you get the quiet arithmetic behind the loudest real estate market in America. Insurance carriers have done that math already. Several have simply left the state. Miami is not the fastest sinking city on this list. It is the one where the ground itself has chosen a side. Number 9, Alexandria, Egypt. Sinking rate around 3 millimeters per year, pressing down on 5,000 years of history. Alexandria is the oldest city on this countdown by 20 centuries. Founded by Alexander the Great, home of the ancient world's greatest library and its tallest lighthouse, and built where the Nile Delta meets the Mediterranean on river sediment that has been compacting since the pharaohs. For most of history, the Nile itself balanced the books, delivering fresh silt with every flood to rebuild what the sea took. Then the 20th century dammed the river. The silt deliveries stopped. The delta kept compacting, and the replenishment never came again. Now the ledger runs one direction only. The ground descends 3 millimeters a year, while the Mediterranean rises to meet it, and the effects have moved from academic papers into the streets. Buildings in the old quarters cracking and collapsing at a rate that has alarmed Egyptian engineers, seawater gnawing the foundations of a city that predates seawater management by millennia, and studies warning that large districts, home to millions, sit within a couple of meters of the waterline. The city that once lit the ancient Mediterranean from its great lighthouse is now watching that same sea come for its foundations. 5,000 years of surviving conquerors, and the patient enemy was the water table all along. Number 8, Norfolk, Virginia. Sinking rate 3 to 5 millimeters per year. And this entry should concern every American watching, because Norfolk is not just a city. It is the home of the largest naval base on planet Earth. Naval Station Norfolk, the headquarters of American sea power, and the piers that birth aircraft carriers, sit on the Chesapeake Bay at the epicenter of the fastest relative sea level rise on the entire Atlantic coast. The ground here is descending for reasons older than the Navy. The land is still slowly slumping back from the last ice age, and decades of groundwater pumping accelerated the descent. Combine sinking land with a rising Atlantic, and Norfolk's tide gauges record what coastal scientists call the East Coast's preview, the waterline climbing relative to the streets faster than almost anywhere in America. The consequences are already operational. Neighborhoods flood on rainless days when the tide alone backs up the storm drains, residents checking tide charts the way other Americans check traffic. And at the base, the Navy has been forced to rebuild its own piers higher, hardening the infrastructure of national defense against water that no longer waits for storms. Pentagon planning documents openly classify the region's flooding as a security concern. Read that again. The mightiest Navy in human history, adjusting its home port because the ground beneath American sea power is going down 3 to 5 millimeters every year. The carriers will float regardless. The question is the city around them. Number 7, Shanghai, China. And now, the exception. The city that clawed its way off this list, and the reason it still earns the number 7 slot, is the price it paid to get there. Through the 20th century, Shanghai was the fastest sinking major city on Earth. Built on the soft mud of the Yangtze Delta and drinking recklessly from its own aquifers, China's greatest metropolis sank over 2.5 meters, more than 8 feet, between the 1920s and the 1960s. Entire districts descended below flood level. The pattern should sound familiar. It is Jakarta's exact disease, running decades ahead of schedule. Then Shanghai did what almost no city on this countdown has managed. It stopped. The government banned unregulated groundwater pumping, metered every well, piped in surface water, and then went further, actually injecting water back into the aquifers, reinflating the ground like the air mattress our Jakarta episode described, but in reverse. The descent slowed from centimeters per year to millimeters. Today, Shanghai still settles slightly. The weight of 1,000 skyscrapers on Delta mud guarantees that, and it defends itself with hundreds of kilometers of flood walls guarding against the river and the sea. But the freefall ended. Shanghai is on this list as the control group, proof that the disease-killing Jakarta is treatable if a government acts decades early with total authority and accepts the bill. Every other city on this countdown is, knowingly or not, choosing between Shanghai's discipline and Jakarta's moving trucks. Number 6, Houston, Texas. Sinking rate up to 2 inches per year in the worst hotspots, America's 4th largest city and its most quietly deflated one. Houston's story is groundwater again, but with a Texas-sized twist, oil. For a century, the region pumped everything out of the ground, water for the explosive suburbs, petroleum from the fields beneath them, and the ground responded the only way ground can. Parts of the metro area have dropped 10 feet or more since the 1920s. Entire subdivisions around Jersey Village and the Northwest sank so persistently that the region created legal subsidence districts, government bodies whose entire mission is regulating how fast Houston is allowed to descend. The regulation worked where it was enforced. Some historic hotspots have slowed dramatically. But the sprawl keeps sprawling, new wells keep tapping the aquifers at the growing edges, and the newest satellite surveys still catch sections of the metro dropping at rates among the fastest in the country. And Houston's subsidence carries a uniquely cruel multiplier. This is hurricane country. Every inch the ground gives up is an inch handed to the next storm surge, an inch deeper that Harvey-scale rainfall pools in neighborhoods that used to drain. When Hurricane Harvey parked over Houston in 2017 and drowned it under 50 inches of rain, the flood maps of that catastrophe traced, street by street, decades of quiet sinking. The ground did not cause the storm, it set the table for it. Number 5, New Orleans, Louisiana, sinking rate up to 2 inches per year in the fastest districts, the American capital of subsidence, and the only major U.S. city substantially below sea level already. New Orleans is the countdown's most haunting entry because its descent is a trap of its own protection. The city is built on Mississippi Delta swamp, soft, young, water-fat sediment that compacts the moment you drain it. And draining it is precisely what the city must do to exist. The levees keep the river and the Gulf out, the pumps hurl the rainwater over the walls, and every gallon removed lets the sponge beneath the streets compress a little further. The levees that keep the water out are the reason the city keeps going down. Roughly half of New Orleans now sits below sea level, parts of it more than 2 meters below, inside a walled bowl in Hurricane Alley, sinking fastest exactly where the protection works best. America learned what that bowl means in 2005, when Katrina's surge broke the walls and the water, obeying gravity, filled the below sea level city like the basin it had become. Over 1,300 dead in the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. The walls have since been rebuilt higher and stronger at a cost of over $14 billion. But the bowl is still deepening beneath them, 2 inches a year in the worst spots. While the delta that once replenished this land starves behind upstream dams, the Alexandria disease American edition. New Orleans is not on the verge of disaster. It is a disaster's return address, holding the line with pumps, walls, and 2 inches less margin every year. Number 4. Bangkok, Thailand. Sinking rate 1 to 3 centimeters per year, a capital of over 10 million, descending toward its own gulf, with its government already whispering the word nobody wants to say, relocation. Bangkok is Jakarta's understudy, running the same script one act behind, a megacity on soft delta clay, decades of unregulated wells draining the aquifers beneath explosive growth, a descent that peaked at alarming rates before well regulations slowed but never stopped it. Large districts of the Thai capital now sit barely a meter above the Gulf of Thailand, and the great floods of 2011, which drowned swaths of the city for months and rattled global supply chains, previewed the endgame: water that arrives easily and leaves a city this low very, very slowly. Thai officials have studied seawalls, studied pumping bans, and, tellingly, have publicly studied the option of moving government functions out of Bangkok entirely, the Indonesian solution. When two of Southeast Asia's great capitals are independently pricing their own evacuations, that is not a coincidence. That is a region reading the same geology and reaching the same conclusion. Number 3. Jakarta, Indonesia. Sinking rate up to 25 centimeters or 10 inches per year in the north, the largest urban area in human history and the first modern capital officially being abandoned to the water. Regular viewers know this story in full because we dedicated an entire investigation to it. It is on your screen and in the description. The short version, for the countdown, 40 million people, piped water reaching only 70% of them. Millions of wells draining the aquifers daily. Northern districts 8 feet lower than a generation ago. A mosque standing abandoned out in the sea where the coastline used to be. And a government that has already inaugurated its replacement capital, Nusantara, 1,000 kilometers away in Borneo, designed for 2 million people, while 40 million remain behind with a $40 billion seawall that the country's own scientists warn will itself sink. Jakarta held the crown of fastest sinking megacity for years, and its response, retreat, makes it the most consequential entry on this list. But measured purely by speed, the satellites say 2 cities are now falling faster. Number 2. Tehran, Iran. Sinking rate, up to 25 centimeters per year on the plains, the countdown's biggest shock, because Tehran is nowhere near the sea. Every other city on this list is fighting a coastline. Tehran, a capital of 9 million in the mountain shadow of the Alborz Range, proves the disease does not need an ocean, only thirst. Iran's capital sits on an arid plain fed by ancient aquifers and decades of drought, sanctions-era agricultural self-reliance. And unchecked urban growth have drained those aquifers with a ferocity satellite scientists describe as among the most extreme ground deformation ever measured around a capital city. Sections of the plains south and west of Tehran are dropping as much as 25 centimeters a year. Fissures, actual cracks in the earth, hundreds of meters long, have opened across farmland and crept toward infrastructure, splitting roads, threatening rail lines, buckling pipelines. And unlike coastal subsidence, this version carries a uniquely permanent cruelty we explained in our Jakarta investigation. An overdrained aquifer collapses and can never fully reinflate. Every year of this descent is storage capacity deleted forever, a desert nation, destroying its own water bank to survive the present. Tehran is the entry that should recalibrate how you see this whole countdown. The sinking city crisis is not a coastal problem. It is a groundwater problem, and it is hollowing out capitals 1,000 kilometers from any tide. And now, number 1, Mexico City, Mexico. Sinking rate up to 50 centimeters, 20 inches per year in the fastest districts. The fastest sinking major city on the face of the earth. And the reason is a decision made 500 years ago. Mexico City should not exist where it exists. The Aztecs built their island capital, Tenochtitlan, in the middle of a vast mountain lake, a Venice of the Americas that stunned the conquistadors who saw it. Then the Spanish conquered it and made the most consequential urban planning decision in the history of the hemisphere. They drained the lake. The modern megacity, home to over 20 million people, stands on the dried bed of that murdered lake in a basin of soft, water-fat clay hundreds of meters deep, the single most compressible ground any major city occupies anywhere on Earth. And from beneath that clay, a thirsty megacity pumps most of its own drinking water. The result is descent at a scale the other 10 cities on this list cannot approach. The historic center has sunk an estimated 10 meters, over 30 feet, since the Aztec era. The great metropolitan cathedral leans and dips so unevenly that engineers spent years excavating beneath its foundations just to keep it standing upright. The Angel of Independence monument, built at street level a century ago, now towers atop a staircase of added steps. Steps that exist because the city sank around it and the monument, anchored deep, stayed put. Buildings tilt into each other along historic streets, like drunks holding each other up. Water mains snap, the metro undulates, and NASA-supported satellite measurements confirm the modern rate. Districts descending up to 50 centimeters per year, with scientists concluding the compaction of the ancient lake clay is now essentially irreversible. The ground will keep going down for generations, no matter what the city does next. 20 inches a year, a cathedral rescued from its own foundations, a monument climbing an ever-growing staircase, 20 million people drinking the ground out from under their own feet on the bed of a lake their ancestors were ordered to destroy. The fastest sinking major city on Earth is not in Asia, not on a coast, and not on most people's radar, and it deserves its own full investigation, which is exactly what is coming next on this channel. 11 cities, 4 American, 1 naval superpower rebuilding its own piers, 1 city that fought its way off the list, and 10 still falling, from Venice's patient millimeters to Mexico City's 20 inches a year. Line them up, and the pattern this series has been documenting all along stands fully exposed. The sinking city crisis is barely about the ocean at all. It is about the ground, drained, drilled, drained again, and a simple law we have now watched operate on 3 continents. Nature extends unlimited credit and always collects. Shanghai paid early and lives. Jakarta paid late and is leaving. The other 9 are somewhere on that road arguing about the bill. So here is how we close every chapter of this series with the verdict handed to you. First, which entry shocked you most? The Navy's sinking home port, landlocked Tehran, or a number 1 that most of the world has never heard about? Second, and this is the one I genuinely want to read, tell me the sinking city we missed. Your city, your coastline, the place you have watched change with your own eyes. The best answers in the comments become the next season of this list. And if you want the full investigations behind tonight's entries, the abandoned megacity, the island that started this series, the airport 45 feet down, the playlist is on your screen. The Sinking World. Number 1 gets its own film next. The ground is not waiting. Neither are we. See you there.